Nice. That's nice.
Good. Thank you for that. Thank you. Just broke a fingernail.
Oh, no.
I'm going to have to cancel.
Welcome to Gene's Place at Town Hall Theater. I'm Zach Shivers, the box office manager, and you're watching the Box Office Dispatch. It is after Memorial Day at Town Hall Theater, which can only mean one thing. It's opera season. And this year, Opera Company of Middlebury has two extraordinary productions in store for us. We have La Traviata on our main stage and Babel 46 in the Anderson studio. And joining me today, I have two guests. We'll do one after another. Doug Anderson is up first. He is the artistic director and founder of Opera Company of Middlebury. He's also directing La Traviata this year. And after that, we're going to talk to Alejandro Roca, who is the artistic director of Opera Company of Middlebury's Young Artist Program. And he's going to talk a little bit about Babel 46. So, Doug, thank you so much for being here.
Always love doing this.
La Traviata. This is one of the big ones. It's probably the most, if not the most, one of the most performed operas in the world. It's a lot of people's first opera, partly because it is the opera that makes you fall in love with opera. The music is so good, the characters are interesting, and every production's a little bit different. And so that first question that I wanted to start with is, what was your first time seeing La Traviata? What do you remember about it?
Well, I was tipped off that you were going to ask that question.
Okay.
And it has created in me a lot of deep thought about my past, and how it is I'm even sitting here today. But if you don't mind, it's kind of an interesting story.
Please.
I'm writing for television in the 90s, and I'm living in New York. And one day, a handwritten letter comes to the studio, and it's somebody I hadn't seen from college in 20 years, saying, "Are you free tonight? I've got an extra ticket to the opera. My husband can't make it." And I hadn't seen this person in 20. I'm like, "You bet, I'll be there." So we go there, fabulous seats. I'll never again have seats like that at the Met Opera. And it happened to be Puccini's Turandot at that time. And I'm like, they write music like this?
Right.
I'd come out of musical theater, wonderful thing, but it just absolutely just attacked me, that piece. And so, okay, wonderful, thank you so much for inviting me. And I go back to my apartment, and I hadn't realized, I never noticed that next to the turntable, remember turntables?
Oh, yeah.
Was a 2-album set of Turandot, the famous one with Corelli.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And so I started listening to it. It's very good practice to listen to something after you've seen it actually in the house, because you start picking up on things you kind of missed in the moment. And now I'm listening in the morning, and I'm listening to it in the evening. I'm walking through Central Park singing Nessun Dorma. It's the only opera I know, but it's just really sort of turned my head around. I'm like, okay, I have to test this thing out. Maybe this is a one-shot wonder. I'm going to go back to the Met and see what I see. And it was Traviata. And this starred one of my favorite singers, who I kind of lost track of, Ainhoa Arteta. She was a Spanish singer. And as you say, riveted to my seat, crying, thinking, oh my gosh, this is extraordinary. I have to direct opera. So I decided I was going to direct opera. Now, no one's going to hire me to direct opera. I never went through an opera program. I don't know the people in the business. I never, interned with an opera company. But I've decided I'm going to direct opera. And so my joke, which I tell my family members often, is that I had to build a theater and start an opera company before anybody would ask me to direct opera. And sure enough, now we're in our 23rd season, and I've directed 30 operas. And Emily Crum, if you're out there somewhere, thank you for that ticket. You changed my life. But I've been thinking about the last couple of days, sometimes there's somebody or something that opens a door for you to a universe you never knew existed. And that's what happened to me that night. I never dreamt, before that I'd ever have anything to do with it. Why would I care, about opera? But having two exquisite experiences in the theater, and that record album changed my life.
First of all, I just want to say, no one tipped me off. You got tipped off that I was going to ask that question, but I didn't know that was going to be your answer because that's incredible. Like that, the Traviata is part of what made you start an opera company.
Part of my origin story.
I promise you, absolutely. I did not know that in advance. So I'm very glad I asked. Thinking about, because Traviata seems to have that effect on people, and I hear from so many people that every time you see it, you get something a little different. It's not one of those shows that you just want to see one time. When you go see someone else's production, what's the first thing you look for? What are you excited to see? What choices are you deciding to see?
Well, it's always who's playing Violetta.
Okay.
Which is one of like the King Lear of female roles in opera, and she runs the gamut of emotions. She's got to be dramatic. She's got to be believable, and it's just a remarkable character. That's sort of what you're looking for. What I'm not looking for, but you get often, is a period production. Verdi wrote it in the 19th century. He had to set it in the 18th century to avoid the censors, because it's about, let's face it, a prostitute.
Yeah.
Traviata means fallen woman. And so whenever I see it, and the woman's wearing 60 pounds of clothing, and everybody's sort of packed into all of this stuff, and it's played as a period, I can't relate to it as well.
Right.
I don't know those people. I don't know the situation. And, excuse me, but it's not sexy. And this is about a woman who wants to control her sexuality. She wants to control her life. And I think we've got to be able to relate to that. So it can still, I guess, be a period production, and they can make me relate to that. But I was determined not to do that, to do a production, which I'm setting, interestingly enough, in the 1920s, in a way that I think our audience will really relate to what she's going through. It's going to seem very real and not like a stuffed period production. And that's my goal.
Walk us through, in a basic sense, just what is the classic story?
Well, this is a woman who it's as a lot of opera. Everybody in it seems to have a lot of money, and the sets are very beautiful, and there's, it's gorgeous. And this is a woman who, she has this magnificent house, and it turns out she hangs out with men with money, and including especially the Baron, and she's having this big party, and she's just everybody knows what she does, but it doesn't matter. And of course, it's based on a true story, and so she's ranked very high in society. Kings had mistresses, everybody had mistresses, but she also has what we think today was tuberculosis, so she's not well, and but she's having this party, and she meets Alfredo, who isn't like anybody else at the party. He's just a sweet, wonderful man. And he professes his love for her. And which leads to this unbelievable stroke by Verdi, this long aria at the end of Act 1. Falling in love, it never occurred to me. Would that be a disaster? Could I actually do that? And she tries to talk herself into it, because he's obviously a wonderful, sweet man. And then she ends with Semper Libre. No, forever free. I'm not going to ever be emotionally attached to anybody. And it's very strong, very defiant. And that ends the act. Then Act 2, they've been living together now for several months. And it's quite wonderful, idyllic, and she wants nothing more to do with that city life. She's willing to live in her little cottage. It's not a cottage, it's opera, so it's a huge thing. But she's in the country, and she's very happy with him and happy to be there. There's some financial issues now that she's cut off all of her sources, so there's some strain on the relationship. But Alfredo's father shows up from Provence, from the farm, and says, you've got to stop seeing my son. She's like, no, I finally found happiness in my life. I can't do that. He says, listen, my daughter is going to get married. And if her family knows that he's with a prostitute, it's going to all crumble. Her future will be destroyed. You have to do it for her. And she's like, okay, I understand. I'll leave him for a little bit. No, you have to leave him forever. And the father insists on this, and it's an incredibly dramatic scene. And let's stop with the plot there. Let's not go any further.
Right. We won't give away the ending. So that's the traditional story that's set in Paris, 1700s. She's a courtesan. You're setting it in Long Island in the 1920s.
Exactly.
So what does that do for the story?
I think of her as being a kind of a proto-feminist, or maybe even a feminist. I picture that she had a very poor upbringing. She looked around and saw, I have no options. I could maybe get married and have 12 children, but I'm not going to do that. So she goes off to the city and takes control of her life and makes choices, and is a success. The 20s now are generally viewed as the first wave of feminism in this country. If you think of what women were in 1910s, it was still very Victorian. They were all trussed up. You couldn't see any skin, 10 years later, their daughters are wearing these flimsy dresses, showing arms, showing legs, rejecting all of that. They are smoking in public, they are drinking in public, and they're saying nobody's going to tell us what to do. And that's something I think my audience can relate to. And so if we put it in, we don't have to change a line, of course, but you put her in that situation, she's one of these exciting young women who are taking control and don't tell me what to do. So it made perfect sense. Also, the fashions from that period is great. I mean, people keep saying it's kind of a Gatsby-esque. I think that's a little reductive, but still, the 20s clothing done by my wife Debbie, who's done all of our productions, are just stunning. But it was the period in which not only women claimed a lot for themselves, they got the vote. Suddenly they're standing up for themselves. So it just seemed a very appropriate time to set it, and it just. The more we talked about it, the more I talked about it with the singers, it seemed to really resonate with them.
When you have a huge opera house with thousands of seats, you have to perform to people very far away. So big costumes and big gestures, they read, but we're not in a big house. We're in a small house. Do you feel like being able to give the actors more freedom of movement is partly because no one's so far away that subtlety won't read?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's what it characterizes. Our original slogan was grand opera in an intimate setting. And so it is grand, full orchestra. We've got full sets, costumes, but you're playing to 232 people, which frees up all kinds of stuff in terms of, as you say, movement, gesture. That kind of thing, or what we call park and bark, where the actors doesn't work in our house. Right. It just doesn't work. If you're at the Met, you've got to do that to reach the family circle that's a half a mile away.
Right.
So I actually make a speech the very first day of rehearsal. I said, opera is artificial. It will never be realistic. But the more we can just move that needle toward realism, toward realistic behavior, and I try to stage it in ways that are very, very real. I've got several moments which I'm calling intimate moments. We would call it that in acting class. Moments when she's just sitting there smoking a cigarette, thinking about her life, her choices, her disease, thinking about how she, like a Marlene Dietrich, they say you could watch her smoke a cigarette for half an hour.
Right.
But to just give the actress during the overture just that moment to be herself, and then the party starts, and I've got to put on the mask and be the perfect person. But anytime I can sort of look behind that to a real person, I'm looking for those and trying to work them into, our hero might be, when he's in the country, half asleep on the settee with a book on his shoulder. We can all relate to that, falling asleep and just being so happy. But he's not standing on stage doing this.
Right.
Now you put him in that place. And another thing I have to say, sometimes singers come who've played these roles several times, and they have to kind of unlearn. They've played it in big houses, and now, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to see if we can play this as realistically, as honestly, as authentically as possible. So it's always a good challenge. You never get completely there, but you create some interesting moments that somebody said to me, and we did Bohème last year, set in the 1970s, Bohemia, New York. Somebody came up to me, I have one word to say about your production: authentic. I think it's the nicest thing anybody said to me.
Yeah.
It just felt very authentically there. The set contributed, the costumes contributed, and the acting styles. There was very little of this.
Yeah. Earlier you said that you're always looking for Violetta when you see this production. So what can you say about who will be playing Violetta here?
Avery Boettcher has, in fact, played it a couple of times before. But another thing that we absolutely must have here are what I called singer actors. And I've repeated it so often that it drives people crazy. We take dramatic values as important as musical values. And there are a lot of stand and sing singers who have fabulous voices, but we need people who are truly going to inhabit the role. So we looked at a lot of people for that role, and it was just clear to me right away that Avery was the one. And now that I've been in rehearsal with her, she's not only fearless, but she's a great colleague. She's got ideas. Let's try that. Oh, that's a great idea. She's going to be magnificent, vocally very strong, but also everything we've been talking about. It's very natural, very easy, very real on stage, and happy to go there.
Yeah. I know I pulled you out of rehearsal and you got to get back to rehearsal, but I have one question I ask everybody that I want to ask before you go, which is, how do you hope people are transformed by this show?
I'm not sure I'd use that word. Obviously, you want them to be entertained. You want them to fall in love with the music. You want them to want to go home and listen to it. You'll want them to get deeper into opera. It's not, I mean, there are message operas. This isn't a message opera other than the larger issue of the way women have been treated throughout the decades. And I think one of the reasons why people are teary-eyed, because she didn't deserve this. Yeah. She didn't deserve this. And it happens. And there's, so to use that corny word, we can relate, unfortunately, still to the injustice. And that's what you want them to carry away, a little bit of anger and a great deal more interest in the opera and in opera in general.
Wonderful. Well, that is a perfect place to end. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Great fun.
All right, and we'll be back in just a minute with Artistic Director of the Young Artist Program for the Opera Company of Middlebury, Alejandro Roca.